Hello, and welcome to Cutoff Genes, the podcast that teaches you how to find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a GenGenie.
And I'm Renee Colvert. I got back in, I snuck in, and I'm here to ask questions.
I am Richard Castle, and I'm the producer, and I'm so excited to be here, back with my regular crew, with Renee again.
The team!
Yes.
The dream team! Your other episodes are amazing, though.
Thank you.
Always you're so proud, because you're like, oh my gosh, this podcast is great. And then you get to realize, I contribute nothing.
That is not true.
That is not true at all.
Absolutely not. You are the reason I like to listen to my own podcast. How about that?
Well, I think you guys are great.
I just skip forward until when I start speaking.
Of course you
As you should. As we all should.
Yes, definitely.
How are you guys?
I am good.
Good?
I'm very fried. I've
bet.
been very busy the last couple of weeks on some crazy cases. But yeah, I'm good. And it's good to be out.
You were like, I was in front of my computer the entire weekend. Can you clock how many hours you put in on this?
I don't, but I could.
Okay.
I worked upwards of, I would say 25 hours.
Yeah, that's
this
too many
weekend.
hours in front of a screen, Julie.
I know, my eyes actually hurt.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but good breakthroughs? Finding some good stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It just takes longer sometimes with these huge trees.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good work. And
Thank you.
Good job having a sunny disposition despite your weekend.
I've got a dead tree out in front of my yard. Julie, could you do anything about that, please?
I
can't even think of a witty retort.
love that eventually that will happen where you will get recruited for landscaping and you're like, oh no, that's not what I do.
No, not that kind of tree. No. All right. Hey, let's talk about DNA, shall we? All right. So actually a couple weeks ago, we're going back to the Golden State Killer, guys.
Of course.
One more time,
You
because
gotta.
there's always fun things happening. So the genetic genealogist, GenGenie, that solved that case has actually finally come forward to identify herself.
Oh, that's exciting.
And she's a 70-year-old former attorney.
70?
70.
Come on.
Yeah. Former attorney that lives in California. Her name is Barbara Ray Venter. And at first she didn't want to come out because she was afraid for her safety.
Sure. Yeah.
She thought that killers might want to kill her because she can solve what.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I can see that. Okay.
She was scared. So Paul Holes, finally when she decided, he came out and he tweeted about her. So we all know. And then I read a really good interview with her.
Yeah.
That I'm just going to give some bullet points because she said some very interesting things that is good to know. So what she's done basically has resulted in at least 8 arrests since that has happened.
Wow.
She became an expert. Listen to this. She became an expert in genetic sleuthing techniques, largely in an effort to assist a newfound cousin.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Kind of like you.
Right. The two matched on the website Family Tree DNA in 2012. Mm-hmm. A few weeks after he learned that the man who raised him was not his father.
Aha. Gotcha.
That old story. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, that old chestnut. It's becoming a new chestnut.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And she said, I thought it would be really nice if I could help him, but had no idea how. So she found the website DNAadoption.org. That is a great website that I checked out a lot.
Right. Okay.
And it offered classes
Whoa.
on how to use DNA matches, family trees, and public records to find one's biological parents. And she taught herself that way.
Come on.
I mean, that's basically, we're all self-taught.
Self-taught.
We're all self-taught.
Yeah.
I just add R's to things randomly.
It makes it more fun.
I know. Although she insists that she still considers genetic genealogy a hobby, she's now talking to various law enforcement agencies about 50 cases involving homicide and unidentified victims.
This is so cool.
I
love that she's 70. I love it.
Me too.
So much. Namely for her, that's amazing.
Sure.
Look what you've done in your life at 70. But
Yes.
I also love it because I think, my mom will take the DNA test because it's fun and she saw it in the aisle at Target, which is now at 23andMe is now at Target. That's
Shut up.
Isn't that crazy? I know. Everybody's loving it. But I think
good to know.
computers can be a little intimidating and the program can be a little intimidating. I don't know.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
And so
It's certainly overwhelming.
Well, the person who figured it out is 70, so you got it. You can
Right.
You can do this.
She has the brain capacity still.
Right. Right.
You know,
Exactly.
you do have to take a lot of notes.
Sure. I can
will
imagine.
say that.
I can imagine.
So you may be wondering how she got involved in criminal cases.
I was just going to ask.
Well, here's the answer. In 2015, she assisted a detective who was trying to figure out the identity of a woman named Lisa who had been kidnapped as a baby.
Okay.
She's now in her 30s. She'd spent most of her life thinking that the man who had abused and then abandoned her was her father. So the guy turned out later to be a convicted murderer.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And in the course of the investigation, detectives also discovered that her DNA did not match his.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So who were her parents? Where did she come from? The man refused to answer questions about her origins. It took 200,000 hours, see, and the assistance of more than 100 volunteers. But ultimately, she figured out using the GenGenie techniques
Right.
that her birth name was Dawn and connected her with her grandfather, who was the closest living relative interested in a connection.
My God.
Isn't that crazy?
That is really nuts. Yeah.
I hope she has a good therapist.
Yeah. I hope that for everybody, but especially her.
Especially, yes. So she was able to narrow it down, and this is how we do it, by narrowing a grouping of brothers who all obviously she had connected DNA to both sides of their parents' families. That's really how you can narrow it down to this one clump of brothers.
Okay.
All had been married at the time of her birth, and those that could be located refused DNA testing. Still, she's gone from knowing nothing to having thousands of people in a tree. So Paul Holes, our friend Paul Holes, he knew about her work, and he thought if she can figure out that girl's identity with so few clues, couldn't she identify someone using well-preserved semen?
Definitely. Yeah.
I assume we're not talking about like sailors who are just really aged very well.
They carry jars of it. They put it in their fridge, and that's disgusting. All right.
I meant actual sailors.
I did too. Okay, so she was asked whether she felt conflicted about doing this kind of work because, you know, that's a common conversation within the community. Her thinking is it's not possible for law enforcement to search a genealogy site like 23andMe without a court order. But genealogists solving adoption case knew that there was a workaround. She didn't get into any debates about it. After the review of Mr. Holes's previous cases, she agreed to help him because she saw what this man had done and thought this guy needs to come off the streets.
Yep. That's amazing.
Here's another interesting thing that needs to be said. There's a misconception that solving a case using this new approach is as simple as finding a genetic match in a database. No. That's DNA is an initial baby clue. In the hands of someone without experience in genetic genealogy, that clue, typically a couple second or third cousins located in the GenMatch database, is useless if you don't know what to do with it.
Sure.
So these were the kind of obstacles to overcome in the Golden State Killer case, which she did. The crucial step is finding the cousins and then building their tree all the way back as far as they possibly can, then building it all the way out as far as they can, and then all the way down.
And then coming back
down.
down.
And then starting to, you know, and they use, and that's where the that's where the traditional genealogy comes into play.
Right.
So Mr. Holes said that genetic genealogists like Ms. Ray Venter are worth their weight in gold.
True. Yeah. You guys are amazing.
I feel like there's going to be a movie of the week that's going to be made about this. Like she's like in semi-retirement and they come to her and said, we need to crack this case. And she's like, I've retired. I'm tired. I don't want to do it anymore. And then they say, oh, but look at what he's done. And she just felt that pull back, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I love movie of the week. I also love TV shows because right now we're so big on like PI cops and finding the guy and getting him. I would love for like that exact same intense energy to be around a GenGenie who's a 70-year-old woman at home by her computer.
Too.
It'd be a great TV show.
There's going to be a reality show.
It's Murder, She Wrote, like a reboot. You know?
Yes. That's fun. That's real fun. Let's do it. Hollywood. We got something for you.
Yeah. Okay, so after several months, we're back to the GSK. After several months, a handful of men emerged as candidates for further investigation because of their ages and histories in California. Now, this is stuff, these are specifics that we didn't know about yet that she cleared up for us. The team took a voluntary sample from the man who looked like the most likely suspect at that time.
Okay.
He was not a match. but he was closely related to the Golden State Killer, which was helpful information.
Insane.
So then she went to the eye color predictor on GEDmatch. Remember I said there's an eye color
Right,
predictor?
yeah.
And they have mine exactly correct, as well as my brother's. It said that the suspect's eyes were, it said that they would be blue, that his eyes would be blue. So
Right.
they're looking for people with blue eyes.
That helps.
Then they went to Prometheus, which I've talked about before, which gives a lot of health
Right.
information and also just, stuff you're likely or not likely to have. And it said he would likely bald prematurely.
So we're looking for a blue-eyed bald guy.
Yep, a
Okay.
blue-eyed baldy. And a DMV photo showed a receding hairline.
Okay.
So, all
I mean,
of these
it helps.
predictions can be
It
misleading, but
helps.
it's a way
Yeah.
to help build. You can't take it. You certainly have to take it with a grain of salt, but these are all good clues. So soon after the Golden State Killer announcement, Parabon, who's the company that works with CeCe Moore, started doing their work. So CeCe was out there. And then Colleen Fitzpatrick, who's another genetic genealogist. She's a rocket scientist turned genetic genealogist,
okay.
by the way. And she's now working with a company called Identifinders International, also solving murder cases. So that's why Ms. Ray Venter came out, because she saw that, well, these other people are coming out. Whoever wants to kill us won't just focus on one of us.
Right,
So
yeah.
the more of us that come out, the safer she feels, apparently.
I love it.
Other genealogists feel that the excitement about helping catch the Golden State Killer, some in their community are failing to remember that cooperation comes at a cost. This is interesting, involving the conflicted feelings about it.
Okay.
Once they've turned over their insights about all that can be gleaned from a public family tree and genetic data to law enforcement, there's no taking that back if they don't like how the techniques are used
Right.
going forward.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of people are conflicted about
Just something to
that.
consider and see how can we have a consistent
Right.
sort of protocol here.
Yeah. So and this is another warning that kind of speaks to, just having somebody's DNA doesn't mean you can do it without knowing a lot about genetic genealogy. There are people who are self-proclaimed search angels, which I'm a self-proclaimed search angel.
Absolutely.
But a search angel just means that you do it for free.
Right. Right.
So, you can only be a search angel for a certain amount of time.
Exactly.
But if you say you're a search angel, you could know what you're doing or you could not.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
she says that they're charging adoptees money and they really don't know what they're doing. By definition, actually, a search angel doesn't charge money. They may not know what they're doing, but I think she misspoke there a little bit.
It may be a confusing thing. That sounds like
Well, I'm going to have to contact my search angel because I paid her a lot of money.
Does she find lost socks and stuff for you?
it's great. She's great. She's terrible at her job.
If only.
But yeah, that sounds like semantics. Like it was just a title that was thrown around without quite knowing what it meant.
Right. Well, she said on several occasions she had to explain to an adoptee that the person they'd been told was their father was actually a cousin. And I actually had a similar case recently, such
Curious.
as that somebody had told somebody that they believed exactly who her father was by
Right.
using the DNA. And I checked the work, and she was in the right family, and he may be the father, but there are 3 other brothers,
Ha.
none of who have been tested.
And you said, "I'm sorry, Princess Leia, but,
Yeah.
but your father is actually Darth Vader. I'm so we did the DNA, and I'm sorry, but that's it."
Darn. Oh, that's
funny.
rich. Okay. So after hearing reports of genealogists showing up at police departments to offer their services, Ms. Ray Venter, I've thought of doing that, by the way. Ms. Ray Venter has been reminded why a certification process could be useful, and I think that's smart.
Yes. 100%.
I would go along with that.
Yeah.
I think it's very important that you know what you're doing and that's certifiable.
Right.
Sure.
Julie, you are definitely going to be the next Jessica Fletcher. Like in another 20 years, I'm going to see you. You're going to be like, Murder
she solved using science.
Great. Perfect.
Murder she matched.
Rolls off the tongue.
Perfect.
And you're certifiable.
Listen, it's destiny.
You couldn't be any more right. Okay, so So yeah, if anyone gets it wrong, going back to the certification process being an important aspect, and I agree with her, because if anything gets it wrong, it could damage the whole field. So
100%,
I think we
yeah.
need to tread lightly. It's in general, it's a very positive thing I think that is happening with this. But let's slow our roll a little bit, guys, and really check our work.
Yeah, exactly. I think Wikipedia is a great example of that. That if so long as we have the facts right, it's something we can trust. But if we get people in there who are just like, yeah, I mean, it's probably this, then none of us can trust
Yeah,
it.
probably doesn't cut it for me.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I was Googling a song lyric this weekend. Actually, it was the song "I've Never Been to Me" by Charlene. Anyway, and
She's
the
been
lyric,
undressed by kings.
and she's seen some things that a woman ain't supposed to see. But anyway, someone had written the lyrics on Google, and they were wrong.
Yep.
Like I listened to the song, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not the right lyrics. So you really do have to kind of check your work. You know, you
Right.
Not everything on the internet is fact.
You heard it
Oops,
here
surprise.
first, folks.
That was a breakthrough. So one last thing Barbara had to say, she still hasn't found the father of the cousin in Britain.
Huh.
And that was years ago. But just recently a new match popped up. So this may be the year that she solves that as well. And that just goes to show that things that seem very easy at face value. I mean, as a second cousin, you should be able to solve it pretty quickly
Right.
if you know what you're doing. She still hasn't. So
Isn't that crazy?
that can happen. Because you know why? NPEs.
Sure, yeah.
So on paper and even in science, it looks like it should be them, but what we don't realize is there's another ghost person that nobody knew about.
Right.
Right. That's why if I haven't solved something, I tell my clients to hold tight. Because any
give it a
day
second.
a new match could come in and that'll break the whole thing up.
They're at Target,
Yeah,
for
so
Christ's sake.
NPE's relative will be shopping through Target
Right.
and go, 23andMe, I'll try that, right?
Right, I forgot to get a birthday gift. I'm just going to pick this up real fast. Easy peasy.
Lemon squeezy. All right. So on that note, hey, let's take a break.
Take a break.
All right.
If you're enjoying Cutoff Genes, please subscribe, rate, and review. Now back to Julie and Renee.
Okay, we're back. Hey, have you
Hi.
guys ever heard of the Polk Directories?
Wait, say it again?
The Polk Directories.
No.
So I think our listeners have because Betsy mentioned it on the last podcast.
There we go. Okay, so they've had time to look it up.
Yes,
They're well
as to-
versed. I got to
right,
get
'cause
myself caught up.
I had never heard of it either.
Okay.
And it actually helped her find her biological mother.
Cool.
As she mentioned in that. And so the Polk Directories are these directories that used to be annually printed in almost every city in America.
Look at that.
And they would give the name and address of people living at a certain house. I mean, obviously address. But it also sometimes talked about what they did for a living and who else was living there. And it was like a census, only it was a yearly thing. And so you could go in and just,
I was really struggling with hearing what polk. P-O-L-K?
yes.
Okay.
You think I'm saying poke?
Idea.
Yeah, that's
You
what I
there?
thought Betsy was
Hello?
saying
You
too.
in there? Yeah,
Poke.
yeah.
I thought it was polka, and I'm like, oh God, she has to go do a dance or something.
It's rough. This is not easy.
There's so many steps we have to go to look at them.
So it's a census, essentially.
It's essentially a census, but
Okay.
it's a hardbound directory.
Cool.
And where are these said directories?
Yeah.
So they're sitting in most libraries, guys. Isn't that interesting?
It is.
Right. So they were published before the internet. They stopped being published, obviously, after that. But most libraries in your local town will have the Polk directories for that town.
Look at that.
And that's an amazing resource.
And what all can you find there? You can find where they live, what they do.
Right. You can let
Favorite
me see.
color, favorite food.
ID city directories, yes, are some of the most underused genealogical sources available. Yet the old directories exist for virtually every community in America and often the earliest times of settlement of a community.
Crazy.
Come on. And some date back over 150 years. Some collections are nearly complete for every year in which the directory was published. And surprisingly, they exist and are quite easy to find, like I said.
But I wonder who compiled this. In other words, I don't remember anyone coming to my house and going, who lives here.
Well,
Yeah.
think about the phone directories. They were sponsored. They were privately owned companies. So Polk, who's obviously the company that did this, they were only one of several They had competing directory companies too, but Polk obviously was the most successful.
Interesting.
Until the internet.
And it's just analog. It's not online.
No, and they obviously will. Actually, it says something about it here. The city directories provide an unmatched source for finding the exact place a person lived and often an alternate source to identify residents of a particular time period. And they can also act as a substitute for the lost 1890 census, for example. Did you know that the 1890 census is lost?
Ooh,
Yeah.
Somebody got fired.
We
Who
don't.
lost
We
it?
don't have. I bet it was a fire because everything was lost in a fire in genealogy.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
Although, why was all of the census in one place?
Yeah, guys, we gotta not
Well,
keep
I
them
guess it makes
right
sense.
by the stove. There's another place to put that.
I'm gonna Google that. Wait, what was your question, Renee? Was it about what else is in there?
Yeah, well, like what all does it? So it's who they are, but what else does it list?
Sometimes their occupation.
cool.
Who else is in the household?
Cool.
Like a census.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I like it.
I don't know if it says their age, but and they're probably different by different directories.
Right.
But it's a great resource, guys. Oh, that's what I was going to tell you. They're almost completely in just hardbound copies in libraries, so they haven't put them on microfiche yet.
that's it.
Or digitalized them yet.
Crazy.
And that's going to take a while because there's so many of them. But you can go. In fact,
You can go to the library.
just this last weekend, I called a library in Hollywood, Florida, because I have a potential birth mother that was living there at that time.
Wow.
And she gave a specific name that I thought may not be her name, which
Yeah.
happens a lot. But I gave that name. So I talked to a librarian and they said, okay, email it to me and I'll look it up for you when I have a chance, for like 3 years, like the year that the child was born and the year before and the year after. And I gave him 3 different names that sounded similar, like other names she could have used or what could have been a real name. I haven't heard back from them yet, but he's going to do it for me. So if you
look
get
it
a
up.
nice librarian, generally they won't do it. But if you get a nice librarian, they just might.
That
So
is amazing.
It
Now-
pays to be nice.
You saying that they were private made me think, has any genealogist ever used a phone book as part of their research?
Absolutely, I'm sure.
Crazy.
I'm sure.
Look at that.
It's hard to find those because
Well,
where do you
yeah.
store them?
So libraries don't hold on to them?
Phone books?
Yeah, I know that seems odd, but it's a book, technically. That'd be weird. You're right. It'd be weird to hold on
wouldn't.
to it.
And maybe they do have white pages online now,
Sure.
which takes the place of that. But I think you have to agree to be in that. Whereas, I don't know. I
Right.
don't know what I'm talking about
No,
right
I
now.
think you do,
All right.
but it just goes to show like because you think of the websites that you've listed and that's what you can use, and you're like, no, there's so many other
There's
resources.
there's so many other ways.
Cool.
And here's another way. Here's another
I'm
important,
ready.
Here's another important thing. Why would you think obituaries are a vital part of genealogical research?
Does it say where they died and how old they are?
Yep.
The location?
It also says, okay, it can help broaden the picture because it includes details of a person's life when they settled in a specific area. A lot of them do that. They tell their life story, what their hobbies were, any military service they were part of, and so on, where they were born, where they went to school, where they work.
Where you can
what
send
fraternities
flowers if you
yes.
were really far behind on this. Right, yeah.
what fraternities they joined, all the nice juicy stuff that, makes our ancestors come to life.
Yeah.
It's also, and this is something that is very important, it's difficult to find living people nowadays. Very difficult.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. On
Yes.
Ancestry, living people are not identified on public trees because it's a privacy issue.
Yeah.
So if you go to a public tree, if somebody is living, their name isn't there. There's a spot for them, but you don't know their name. Generally, we'll go back to the 1940 census,
Right.
and that way we find their parents, and then we can find the children that are listed in that house, and that's how we get the children's names. However, the last census available to the public is 1940.
What?
We don't get the 1950 census until 2021 or 22.
That's I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
thought all censuses
Censuses.
were available immediately.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Now we're having a good time. Before, but now
I hate you so
it's fun.
much. So that's obituaries almost exclusively list their children.
Yeah.
So if they had children that were born after 1940, if you can find that person's obituary, you're golden.
You can find their kids. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
So I've recently really gotten into this. What I have discovered is that obituaries are not as easy to find as you thought they were.
I believe that.
It's been really difficult because they have, there's a site called legacy.com that I thought was just supposed to have every
of them.
obituary ever written.
Yeah.
Well, no. They don't go back very far. In fact, every obituary I've searched on legacy.com does not exist to them. But I know it exists because there's a reference to it on Ancestry.
Also, aren't obituaries specific to what like newspaper they were printed in? So you
Yes.
have to know. I mean, and if it's in an area that had 4 or 5 papers at one time, there was like a morning, an
Right.
evening, a local, a tabloid. So it could be anywhere.
Tabloid obituaries are fun.
Right. Exactly. Listen, I learned
They're
a
like,
lot.
John Brown died yesterday. He was known for cheating on 3 wives. Okay.
And one of his babies was an alien. The Enquirer would like you to know.
Oh, that's good. Okay. So yeah. So yes, another case that I'm working on. There were. I've got it narrowed down to who I think is the father of this woman.
Right.
However, he had aunts and uncles who also had kids, and I know who most of those kids are, and they're out of the picture. However, this one aunt who died in a completely different city,
Right.
had 4 sons, and I can't for the life of me figure out their names. But I know for a fact she has an obituary because I found the reference to it on Ancestry, and it's in Seattle.
Look at that.
So once again, I went to the archives of that newspaper, and they don't go back that far. But they are on microfiche in the Central Seattle Public Library.
Wow.
Once again, I have to get there.
Yeah.
And I called them, and they have it. They can't give me the information without me having a library card there. So I either have to ask a friend who lives in Seattle to go look at it for me and write it down, or sometimes local genealogical societies will do it for you for a very small fee, which is
It's nice.
really good to know.
And people you trust, too, because they know what they're looking for. I would bet.
Exactly. Yes. And or there's also you can go to your local library and request that it be transferred to that library as long as you're a member.
Okay.
So that's
I'd do that one. I'd do that last one. That one sounds easy. Yeah.
You know what's funny is that sounds the least exciting to me
Well,
because I
yes.
don't like waiting. I think that's why.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Well, that's old news, isn't it?
All right.
Okay. All right. So those are some fun tips.
Awesome. Those
All
are
right.
excellent tips. Good job.
You're welcome. Let's take a break.
Thank you for listening to Cutoff Genes, the new podcast starring Julie Dixon-Jackson with Renee Colvin.
All right, we're back.
I missed you.
Guess what?
What?
We skipped a week. I'm so sorry, listeners. I hope you survived.
I bet they did. I bet they're
Barely
okay.
did. Yeah. Because it was quite a cliffhanger last week. So
Yeah.
we're gonna...
Well, now I haven't been here. Give me the gist.
Oh.
Where are we at?
Okay, so where we are at
Right.
is that one day, year and a half ago-ish, I checked my DNA matches, and I had a first to second cousin match on my paternal side.
What?
Yeah, that had just come in overnight, and that was huge.
Of course it is. Yeah.
that was a big, big deal.
And how long had it been when you had hit that sort of dead end where you couldn't find your birth father?
Right. So I found out that Malcolm was not my dad in the beginning of 2015?
That seems right.
Yeah, in the beginning of 2015. So it had been like a year and a half.
Okay.
Right. So I'd spent a year and a half, and lots happened in that year and a half. I think I mentioned last week I looked at the account, and it was called HK, which was somebody's initials, obviously.
Okay.
And then the person that manages that account had a name that seemed like it was probably her actual name, just her last name first, and blah, blah,
Okay,
blah.
great.
So, which is very helpful, and that's actually a really good search tip, guys. I'll talk about it another time, but it's a tell.
I like it.
So I sent off a quick message and said, hey, you match, HK matches me pretty close. You got a tree? It's very casual. And then I went to Facebook and I typed in the name that I thought was her.
Yeah.
Because it was reverse of her username.
Very smart.
And up came a young lady named, well, her first name's Naomi, and she's from Melbourne, Australia.
Whoa.
And I checked out her profile. She knows this. And her partner was named Hunter, and his last name is K.
Okay.
And so that was him. That was his DNA.
Crazy.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't friend request her right away because I was waiting for my Ancestry message to come back, even though I knew it probably wouldn't come back because people don't check their Ancestry messages or don't have the settings so that they know that they have a message. So I went to the Facebook groups, all of my usual Facebook groups, and I said, guys, look at this. And I, of course, screenshotted the page and said, look at what just came in. Most of the people know me and they know my story. So people were like, oh, my God, this is happening. Oh, God, I would say 1 million people. That's a slight exaggeration.
No, that seems accurate.
But I would say it's accurate. Told me, screenshot it, screenshot it. Because, again, if that didn't want it,
if it goes private.
Yes,
right,
if it goes away, at least I have pictures of what it looked like and, places to go. So I did that. And I spent the next few hours just trying to remain calm. So I then went to DNA Detectives, which is basically where the GenGenies hang out. And then I went to one of the groups in Australia, one of the Australian groups that said that's called Australian DNA Genealogy. And I was telling them about it, and I was giving them. I said, "So this person lives here, and she lives with, and her boyfriend, I think, is my cousin." And la 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 la. And all of a sudden, a message popped up from her.
Whoa.
On that page.
Whoa.
That said, "Hi, Julie, I just sent you a message."
Whoa.
So she was on that page.
Crazy.
So she's somebody who was interested in DNA, which is awesome.
Great.
Yeah. So we just kind of messaged back and forth. I gave her the down low. The low down. I gave her the low down, but I kept it down low.
Yeah, that's fun.
Is that right? Okay, it is now.
That's a lot to give somebody. Your story's insane.
No, I didn't tell the whole story because we don't want to scare anybody away.
Sure, smart.
Although I thought she might know it since she was a member of that page and a lot of people on those pages. But
you're looking for your dad.
I said, I didn't even say that, I don't think. What did I say? I think I said, I'm an adoptee. I probably did say I'm an adoptee, and he's a close match, and could I look at his tree?
Perfect.
And she's like, and I said, I'm adoptee, but I mean no harm. I actually said, I mean you no harm. And she said, I'm sure you can. Let me ask his family first.
Smart.
Which was, understandable. And so, eventually they gave her permission. And what did I do? I started building a tree off of her tree, as I have told everybody that's what you do. HK and I, Hunter and I, share 378 centimorgans. Which means we're somewhere between a first and a second cousin.
It's pretty close.
Yeah. And so I started building that tree. It's very close. It first appeared that most of his dad's family was firmly rooted in Victoria, where I'm from. And the mom's side seemed to be solidly in New South Wales, which is where Sydney is, which is up north.
Okay.
So I focused on the dad's side because that's where I was born.
Sure, yeah.
And I went back really far. The dad's father had like 10 siblings each.
Boy.
No. Each of them had 5 on each side. Siblings, male siblings.
Okay, so you got a lot of work ahead of you.
Yes. So open rabbit hole, insert self. And they were all around the right age where they could have fathered a child.
Sure.
So there was that. After a few hours, I got to, a few hours, I said it. I got to one uncle, because what I do is I do a few branches, and then I go back and I research just those people a little bit just to make sure they're in the right place to see if I should keep going. And there was one uncle that was a local politician. He was a mayor. He had been a mayor and had been in politics all of his life.
Right.
So my mind immediately went, oh, and he was married and had children. My mind went, oh, this actually makes sense. He had a little something with my biological mother. She got pregnant, and he paid her off to never reveal who he is.
What?
I mean, he obviously didn't pay her off much because,
Sure.
But to me, that was like, oh.
Maybe this is it. Yeah.
It's a really good guess, and I don't know how this turns out, but I mean, I still think that when your daughter shows up after all those years, you can kind of think, well, he paid me off a long time ago, but I think it's safe at this point.
yeah.
He's probably not in office anymore. And,
Right.
Exactly. The value of the dollar
definitely.
is gone up.
But however, she very much doesn't want to make waves with people, and I think she probably was afraid. Well, if this was the case, I would think she was probably maybe bullied. Maybe she was threatened. Who knows?
Right. Way,
I don't.
Certainly not.
Clearly not. But it seemed feasible to me, so I was like, oh, wait, maybe this is it. So then, I built this tree,
Right.
as far as I could. Then I'd never built one before, and I wasn't sure what to do next. So I went to DNA detectives, and I said, hey, what do I do now? And that's when I met Rose, who I've talked about before, who
Right.
was the search angel that lives in Australia, which was perfect.
The girl who threw the thing off the Titanic. We know. Okay. Yeah. Sorry,
when she was very old.
Right. Yes, your Rose helped you out. Got it.
Two people could have fit on that door
They
or whatever that
absolutely
was.
could
That
have.
trunk.
Thank you. I know.
I digress. Okay, so I heard from Rose, and she kind of talked me through it. She helped me build the tree and told me all of these things, and then I walked away, as you have to do, because it takes a while for the whole algorithm. Woke up the next morning, no leaf matches. So that was a problem, because if you don't have leaf matches, that means that you're not quite on the right track, or that the people that you're looking for still aren't in anybody else's tree or aren't on your tree yet.
Okay.
So Rose had noticed a couple of common matches that I've had for several years, and I've spoken to them a few times. They're a brother and sister. They matched me, I think, they probably matched me like a third cousin, because the second cousin would have been too exciting. The brother has a tree, like a skeleton of a tree, and they were from Sydney. So once again, I didn't think that, I'd ever be able to figure that out. But Rose said, hey, do me a favor and build a tree for them, build a branch for them, and then connect your DNA to that.
Okay.
Which I did. And it soon became clear that the gentleman's tree was not quite correct. He'd skipped a generation. His grandmother great-grandmother was named Andrew. He put her in as Andrew, but it was actually Anderson, which was from
Makes
the
a
next.
difference.
Yes,
Yeah.
which was actually his great-great-grandmother. Hunter's tree, his great-grandmother was an Anderson.
Okay.
With a little more research, both Andersons were from the Sydney area, and they were born about 10 years apart.
Great.
But it looked very promising.
Okay.
So we're starting to think, and further research showed how we could actually connect them. So all of a sudden, it was Hunter's mother's side instead of the father's side.
Look at that.
So
Just based
I
off a slight
let
name
the
thing.
father's side go
Right.
and started working on the mom's side, and that's when things really started happening.
Crazy. That's incredible.
Then, that was when Rose said, "I think it's the Fisher line." The name Fisher. So that meant that my father would likely be one of Hunter's great uncles. Is that what it is? Yes, great uncles.
Okay.
So Rose advised me to purchase his great grandfather's death certificate from 1972.
Okay.
Paternal on the Fisher side, which I did. And all of a sudden, and death certificates in Australia, I don't know if they still do, but used to list all of the children somebody had
Whoa, cool.
and their ages at the
Okay.
time of the death, which is very helpful. American ones don't seem to do that, so that's a problem. But so now he had 5 children. 4 of them were boys,
Look at that.
and only 2 of them were still living, or were living at the time that I was conceived. Then another match came in. Long story short, I was able to connect him to the Fisher line as well.
Cool.
So I'm looking at Fishers, and it has to be one of these 2 brothers.
Crazy. Crazy.
Yeah.
Cool.
So and I kind of like didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I was like,
It's
is
so
this it?
close.
Have I? Yeah. So after I had been talking to Hunter, of course, I perused his page and looked at all of his friends.
Right.
He allows people to look at his friends, and I was able to ascertain who were his cousins and who were.
Good, you're
You know,
good.
I know.
Okay.
I know. I looked at a lot of people and I figured out, well, that must be a cousin on this side and this must be a cousin on this side. And now that I knew it was Fisher, I went back to that. And there had been one guy that was one of his cousins that I went to his page, and I don't know how to explain it, but before I knew any of this Fisher stuff, I'd gone to his page and there was something familiar about him. I noticed, I looked at all his pictures. He loved his family. He expressed himself. He was very photogenic, but there was just something. I remember thinking, oh, I could be related to him. I see that. You know,
Crazy.
it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So then I went back to him again, and I
right.
looked at his pictures differently. And I realized, wait, that guy in those pictures is my father.
What? Julie, that's crazy.
It has to be is either my father or my uncle.
Yeah.
Because there was the other uncle as well.
Right.
So I decided to message him.
Yeah.
And let Hunter off the hook. And I messaged him at his work. He works with the disabled, and there's a Facebook page. So I decided I'd go that route. And so I just sent a private message to them saying, hey, I'm looking for Rob Fisher. Could you ask him to, and I gave my email address or something. Anyway, he got back to me pretty quickly. He's like, hey, what can I help you with?
Ugh, I love
and
him.
so I said, this is a really long story, and this is going to sound very strange, but I think we may be cousins. And he's like, well, how could that be?
Yeah.
So I started off on the story.
Right.
And I told him how I'd arrived at that. And I pointed him in the direction of my blog so he could really get the whole picture.
You can read the whole thing if you need to. Yeah.
Exactly. Which he did. And then I said, from what I'm looking at, it looks like it's one of your grandparents' children.
Wow.
And I asked him about his Uncle Max because I thought that would be a better way to present it. He could figure out on his own that could also
what
be
you're
his
trying
dad.
to figure out.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't know, he'd only met him a few times in his life. He hadn't seen him in a good 10 years, and he had lived out of state all his life, and now he thought he lived in the Philippines, if he was even living. So, and he had a bunch of kids, but he wasn't in touch with them either and didn't know their names.
Okay.
I was like, okay, well. And I had researched Max before that, and that all checked out. So I told him that, well, I think you probably realize that you're either my first cousin or my half-brother.
Crazy.
And he said,
Yeah.
there's only one way we can find out.
He offered it.
Yes. And I said, yes, there is. Shall I send you a test? And he said, why not?
Oh, what a good guy.
And
I
he
like
was,
him.
you know what? We had been talking for a few days. And we really had a rapport going. He got my story. He had a lot of empathy for me. He realized that this was something I really needed to know. But he said, this is going to change my family.
Yeah.
The way that we know it, what we've always thought. But, the truth
figure
is
it
the
out.
truth. Oh, he's so great.
Yeah.
So I sent him a DNA test. So as we were talking about it,
Right.
After he'd agreed to take the test, I asked him, well, I'd found out that there were 3 boys and 1 girl in that family.
Okay.
And the woman is exactly 11 months younger than me,
Huh. Wow.
which cuts it close.
Sure.
And he said to me, well, from what I have been told, my parents got married because my mother was pregnant with my sister. So they, I believe, had met pretty recently before that. So there's a chance that he didn't even know my mother yet.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that was comforting for both of us.
I have a question, Julie. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but did you go back, once you had his name, this guy's name, did you go back to your birth mother and say, did you know this guy?
Mm-hmm. I did. In fact, I took screenshots of their pictures and put their names on them. And I said, hey, do you know these guys, or do you have any memory of these guys? And she said, never heard of him.
Oh, no. Mom.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
it didn't ring any bells for her. So while I was waiting, I also went and I found his military records, and it described him. The first thing that was interesting was that he was 5'6".
There we go.
Remember how Malcolm was over
Too
6
tall?
foot,
Yeah.
and Lynn is
Very
5'9.5".
Right.
That made a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
Also, he had hazel eyes. Malcolm had brown eyes.
Okay.
I have green eyes with gray rims and brown flecks, also known as hazel. I went back and I was looking at Rob's pictures again, and I came across a photo that I'd never noticed before, or that I'd never seen. It must have been in an album that I hadn't seen. And there was a picture of his father. His father's name was Clive. There was a picture of him, and he was wearing a cap and gown.
Huh.
And he was holding up a rolled up diploma.
Okay.
And he had it was like an idyllic photograph. It looked like the picture that comes in the picture frames before and he looked so proud of himself. And what Rob had written under that was this: what do you do when you retire? You go back to school, of course. Now, having left school when he was just 14, going to university was one hell of a challenge, but he smashed it. And there he is holding his diploma on graduation day. Wow. I'm crying now.
Yeah, Julie, of course.
So when I saw that, I spontaneously burst into tears.
Yeah.
For really the first time, other than the time when I found my mother and I went and crawled into bed with my adoptive mother.
Right.
And I just remember thinking, oh God, I hope this is my father.
Yeah.
Because that was everything that I aspire to be. You want to continue learning for your entire life and evolving. And that was what I felt. That he had left school because his mother had died at a very early age, and they were very poor, and he'd had to work to help support the family. And then had gone into the Air Force or the Navy, and then ended up working for the post office his entire life. But
he's a good
dude. He still wanted to be educated.
Yeah.
So that was, to me, that kind of put a little more pressure on it, hoping that it was him.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had hope, and I spent a lot of time studying his pictures, and then I just had to wait. And wait
for that DNA test to come back.
For that test to come back. And that's where I'm going to leave it off.
Duh, Julie. Okay.
Yep.
You are so strong and so amazing. I would also be like, oh, that's just like me. Yeah. I would also finish college. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had 4 careers now because, I want to try this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. God, I can't wait till next week.
Yep.
I'm excited.
Well, I'll let you know.
Okay.
So that's the end, everyone. All right, Renee, tell everybody about yourself.
Sure. I am on Twitter at Renee Culvert. I'm on Instagram at Renee S. Culvert. I have a podcast called Can I Pet Your Dog? And I'm a guest panelist on a podcast called Allison Rosen is Your New Best Friend.
I'm having a little podcast envy because this is the only podcast I'm a
we gotta
part
get you on
of.
More.
I know,
Listen,
right?
Everybody's on 3 these days.
But I'm Richard Castle. I have a website. I'm a songwriter and a musician, richardcastle.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Castle Songs.
And I am Julie Dixon Jackson. You can find me on Twitter at Jules Jackson. You can also find us on Twitter at Cutoff Jeans Pod. You can find us on Facebook, Cutoff Jeans Podcast. Answer the question. Be creative. You get extra points. And also on Instagram, we have an Instagram page, which is just Cutoff Jeans Podcast. You can also send me a message to Jules at cutoffjeans.com. So that's the end of this week's adventure. And please always remember that the truth is in your genes.